Hello, and welcome to Tech Connects, Dice's podcast where we dig into topics on tech hiring, recruiting, and careers that matter to you. I'm your host, Nick Kolkowski, and today we're going to be talking about AI with Eric Wang, who leads Turnitin AI. Turnitin is a global company that builds products to help schools navigate issues related to AI, learning assessments, and more. For example, they have tools that detect the use of AI in student papers, help streamline educators' grading and feedback processes, and more. Eric is focused on building generative AI at scale to drive Turnitin in new directions. And I want to talk to him about how AI is changing education and the potential lessons there for tech pros everywhere. So let's listen in. I was really fascinated to talk to you because, and just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I know a number of professors and teachers in my life, and I've actually had a couple of conversations with them over the past several weeks, even before we scheduled this, in fact, where we were talking about kind of the implications of AI in the classroom and schools in general. And one of my friends who's an adjunct professor was saying that all of her students were using ChatGPT, and she was getting so angry she was considering using ChatGPT to grade the papers that were being submitted that were written with AI. So it's obviously a massive issue, that's sort of gripping the industry, and it's great that there's a company that is trying to address kind of these concerns. And I was wondering, like, what are, for people who are kind of unfamiliar with it, and a lot of our listeners are students, what are kind of the most common forms of AI misuse in this academic context? And, what do you think can be done about it, especially in terms of like establishing the frameworks and hopefully guidelines around plagiarism and data privacy and things like that? I realize that's a big question and a huge issue, but I kind of just want to get the top level view from you on all of that.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's also very central to, the questions that we're trying to grapple with. I think I'll start with, I believe, and Turnitin also believes, that AI use is not inherently misuse, right? We live in a world where this incredibly transformative technology is changing the way we create, it's changing the way we learn, it's changing the way we communicate, how we think. And it's really important as educators, as schools, to be teaching those skills, right? I mean, you hear this all the time, AI literacy, AI literacy. And I think we also shouldn't get lost in the idea that humans aren't AIs. This is something I'm really passionate about. Humans, AIs, as human-like as they are, they're human-like, they're not humans. Humans bring a lot of unique things to the table: creativity, curiosity, the ability to build, genuine connection, collaboration. And I think there's a lot of places where teaching those skills, critical thinking, creativity, all the things that we just talked about, do require productive struggle. They do require not using help, whether that help is Wikipedia or the internet or Wolfram Alpha for math or AI in this case, right? So I don't think we should be taking the tack of let's ban AI. I think we should be thoughtful about the fact that there are some types of assignments, there are some types of learning where AI is not really going to be helpful. It's not helping move the student forward. It's not achieving the pedagogical or educational goals. And we want to make room for that. We want to have tools that allow those types of assignments to continue to exist, because they're really important in laying that foundational groundwork for students. And increasingly, more and more assignments are going to need AI. More and more assignments should be done with AI as part of the workflow, whether it's helping you think, whether it's helping you polish, whether it's helping you unblock yourself while you're in the middle of a, writer's block. So I don't think it's an or. I don't think it's AI is misuse. I think there's appropriate use. And then the question of what is appropriate use requires tooling. It requires visibility. It requires trust. Where both parties, students, teachers, well, actually administrators too, can all say, yeah, AI use is happening in a conducive, positive way in the institution.
It's interesting. Some of the data that you recently surfaced, I'm going to click over to bring it up, said that there was, in terms of the positive use of it and so on, said that 64% of students are worried about AI compared to 50% of educators and 41% of administrators. So, I mean, obviously what you're saying, we're entering this new paradigm where everyone's kind of figuring out how to best integrate this tool in like an ethical and, hopefully productive way. And yet it seems like there's a lot of apprehension about it, particularly on the part of students. And
Yeah.
what do you think the root of that is? It seems like even though this is an enhancer and and just an interesting, fun thing to tool with at the very least, it seems like there's a lot of anxiety out there. And what do you think? What do you think the root cause of that is? Because that stat really stood out to me.
It did too for me. I remember when we got these results in, I was reading them and it jumped out because it runs so counter, right? It feels at first glance, it feels so counterintuitive to what you think would happen. But as I reflected on it, I realized, you know what though? Students have the most uncertainty. But if you look at the trend in the report, it's interesting. Students have the most, then teachers, then administrators. And I think about that, and I think about, what does disruption look like for each of these types of people, right? So if you're an administrator, you have a lot of control over a university. You are setting strategy. You are able to make purchasing decisions and budgeting decisions, right? The next level down are teachers, and teachers and educators, in the classroom, they do feel a lot of uncertainty. Of course, we know that. But they're also professionals. Many of them have many years of experience, right, that they can lean on. And then you get down to students, and certainly students come in all age ranges, but the vast majority of students that we serve, they're earlier in their lives, right? They're at the beginning of their professional journeys. Many of them are entering college or late high school. The world, all the possibilities are still open to them, but also all the uncertainty. And if you think about it, the way we've always gone to school, the way we've always taught, the norms that they've known, relative to what they know, they're the most disrupted. And so that actually kind of starts to make sense, that many of them have figured out how to succeed, how to continue to make progress in this world with maximal uncertainty, and that's thrown into doubt. Whereas administrators are able to kind of look at the future and say, well, I have this long arc behind me that I can lean on to try to figure out where to go in the future. And so that helped me understand why educators and administrators maybe have a little bit less apprehension than students. I also think, going back to the first point, we need to get better at concrete guidelines. You still have schools saying, let's just not use AI. I think it's less and less, but it still exists. I don't think that's healthy. You have schools saying, well, AI's here, just use it. I don't really, need to take a look at that. I also don't think that's useful. Having right tooling, having right visibility allows you to have the most, productive conversations around what is appropriate use of AI in school, in learning, and in society.
Yeah, I mean, it still seems like it's very early days for it, and it extends beyond school to the job hunting process in a lot of ways, I feel like, because, for example, a lot of companies for a long time relied on Leak Code, and other kind of like code challenge websites to create questions for technical interviews and so on. And that AI, especially for take home work for job applicants, that's AI has been changing the game on that, which has been in turn forcing companies to sort of readjust, like how, and you do see some companies that are kind of like, okay, like this genie is out of the proverbial bottle and we are going to allow you to use AI, but you got to use AI to like solve a really potentially creative problem, which is going to actually show like that you've mastered kind of the core skills here. And it certainly makes sense kind of in a student context too, just because I imagine, let's say it doesn't matter whether you're a literature professor or a CS professor or what have you. I mean, that your students are entering a world in which they're going to be probably using AI as part of their workflows. And so there's probably no reason to hold back on, oh, no, you can't use AI, even though, and the students will see through that too as well. But you do also see this frustration where there's, ultimately the goal of a teacher is to get students to learn and to think. And I think that you've seen some concerns from some educators that, an over-reliance on AI is going to lead to students not maybe using their creativity or their critical thinking skills as much. And I'm curious about how you sort of think about that particular aspect of the problem. Like, I mean, how how do educators design kind of AI integrated learning experiences that can foster that creativity and that cognitive ability rather than sort of, AI tools operating as a crutch? Because that's, obviously a huge problem now.
Totally. I think, first off, we need to recognize that curriculum and education isn't a zero sum game, right? So there's going to be new skills, new jobs, new opportunities that are going to exist as a result of AI um, changing the norms of how we work. Right? Most of what we educate, and I'm not the person who came up with this insight at all, right? So like this has been said a lot. We educate to create people who to educate folks who are going to do ultimately what are fairly mechanical jobs, even our jobs, right? What we would consider white collar intellectual work. I mean, you see that actually being disrupted, I would say disproportionately more these days by AI than maybe manufacturing or other types of roles. And, because you hear things like, if you're a plumber, you are good, which I agree with. I had to do some plumbing the other day, and I'm like, man, it's going to be a while before AI figures out, the pipes under my sink.
Yeah.
But, what it says is something interesting, which is most of our knowledge work, which is digital knowledge work these days, right, is actually kind of mechanical, and it's repetitive. Think about how many administrative things we have to do. You and I are probably on the luckier side. Teachers, educators, their jobs are very administrative heavy. Now, these are kind of complex administrative type jobs, but they're still repetitive. They're time consuming. They're not core to that central part of teaching. And that's what we think of when we think about white collar jobs. So as we think about what critical thinking means, I think the underlying basis, the pillars of what is critical thinking in an AI-enabled world actually are different than what is critical thinking in a world where most people are expected to still to kind of fulfill a well-defined role, right? So that role of the future, you alluded to it. The idea of roles in the future, I think, are going to be much less defined. They're going to lean a lot more on creative intuition. Because the AI can do the mechanical bits. The AI can fill out forms even if they're kind of laid out weird. The AI can answer routine emails and handle just the execution operational tasks. So then what's left? What's left is creative intuition, it's curiosity, it's critical thinking, it's being able to manage a bunch of workers under you, whether some of those workers might be AI, some might be other people. And being able to look at a collection of facts and say, where do we go, right? What is the best path forward to have impact that resonates with me? So when I think about teaching critical thinking, I think about assignments that help a student understand what they're passionate about, right? Because I think the future really is going to belong to not necessarily to I'm the best coder or I'm the best, person who can do this particular scientific task. That'll still exist. But I think the future, by and large, is going to belong to people who are deeply passionate about a problem, deeply knowledgeable about that problem space, and deeply interested in advancing the state of that space. And that requires, a level of comfort in the unknown. What types of assignments, what types of curriculum, what types of interactions between teachers and students create that? I think that's going to be the key.
I mean, to that point, I was thinking, the other thing too is a lot, and I'm coming at this from absolutely no basis whatsoever, but generally, at least when I think back on my own education, for example, a lot of it is based on individual assignments. You sit down, you're given a problem set, you work the problem set, you turn it in, you're graded on it, et cetera. But everything that you were just saying in terms of where the future is potentially going, where it involves like soft skills, where it involves creative intuition and things like that, I wonder if it's going to change education for more priority on group assignments, on working together, on projects where you're expected to employ like empathy and communication with your fellow students in order to solve a creative problem. Just because, it seems like that would work on those skill sets that are sort of complementary to AI in a certain way. But I don't know. I mean, am I off base with something like that? How does that strike you?
Not at all. In fact, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that group work, project-based work, right? I think what group work and project-based work will be the norm of the future. When I think back to my education, the place where I got the most growth in my educational journey was actually in graduate school. Graduate school was very open-ended for me. I was there for 6 years, mainly because I didn't want to get a job, but it turned out to be kind of a cool thing. I explored. On a daily basis, I went in knowing very little about what I was going to do that day. Sure, I had a loose structure of experiments I wanted to run and things I wanted to look at. But the reality is, on a daily basis, I became, I typically would leave the day with more questions than answers, but I would have a few answers to questions that I previously asked, right? And what I learned actually is the ability to sit comfortably in uncertainty, the ability to prioritize questions and to understand which questions were the most important in maybe answering and moving, this sort of my mental state, certainly, and maybe in small ways, my field forward. And how we teach for that, right? How do we do that? Not just as an individual, but I had many conversations with other graduate students, with my advisor, and how we do that as a community. I think that's going to be really key. And where we've landed at, we're Turnitin, and so certainly this is our business, but where we've landed is that actually writing is the most powerful form of, let's call it assessment, but really the most visible way to demonstrate mastery of those skills or growth in those skills, or helping students and educators identify gaps and where we need to improve, right? The reason I think we've known this, writing has always been the most powerful assessment, but it didn't scale. Grading writing effectively, if you're an educator, is hard. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of critical thinking. And for the first time in human history, we also have this tool that can help, I think, scale writing feedback. It's something else that we're looking at Turnitin, and we have all kinds of stuff coming down the pipeline for that. So the idea of what we're building from a big picture perspective, we started off with our AI writing detector, right? This is directly in response to ChatGPT. We needed to everybody was saying, I have no idea what to do. We're flying blind, and we said, all right, let's build a tool that at least helps people get their bearings. But it's not the end all be all. And that's been great. And then now we have, a product and tooling that's really intended to help teachers and students understand proof of process, exactly what you were just talking about. As you do work, really what the teacher is interested in is, what is the path of critical thinking you took to arrive at this finished document, right? The AI detector looks at the finished document. Now we have the chapter we're in is really thinking about what is the process. What is the provenance of this final submission? And then the last piece that's going to finish it out is going to be helping to scale grading and feedback of writing. And I think once you have those pieces, you say, well, we now have the tools. And these are tools. We're not building curriculum. We're not saying this, we're not being prescriptive on how teaching needs to happen. But these are tools that allow you to have really engaging, rich, open-ended dialogue between teachers and students, rooted in, I think, visibility, trust, but also the ability to really look at process and to give really rich feedback without having anybody needing, without teachers needing to stay up till 4 a.m. every night grading. So that's really how we're thinking about the world and the tool, why we're building the tools we want to build, and where I think learning is headed.
It's really fascinating to me, and it's I'm sure from your perspective, like just the I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around the complexities involved in sort of reverse engineering that cognitive process to a certain degree. And a lot of teachers, I feel like a lot of educators, if you ask them, would say that, especially the more experienced ones, if they're up at 4 a.m. reading a paper, that their sense of the student's grasp of the thought process and so on would almost kind of be intuitive, that they've read so many papers in their lives, kind of like, almost like training a model, that they would kind of get that sense.
Right.
And I'm wondering, in terms of how you think about a problem like that. I mean, is it a matter of training an AI on papers that are kind of, or documents or text that's sort of considered superior in terms of like cognitive thought process and so on, and like seeing if there's commonalities in structure, and then building a model kind of based on that? I'm just wondering, I mean, how do you begin to approach a problem? Because it's so nuanced in a lot of ways too. It's fascinating to me. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
there's different tiers, the way I see it. So one of the core tenets that I hold our Turnitin AI team to, and really our whole company to, and I love that Turnitin this is our philosophy. We don't believe that you can replace teachers. I mean, I don't feel like that's a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it out there. We flat out don't believe you should be replacing teachers. And in fact, we believe that teacher-student interaction is the most valuable interaction in education. So really, when we think about augmenting teachers, the lowest tier, the one that I think actually you get the biggest bang for your buck, is in actually automating low-level tasks so that the teacher can get to that high-level judgment, the judgment call, that intuition. And so what does that look like? That looks like things like the teacher leaves inline feedback, little 1 or 2 word phrases throughout a document. And the AI is able to look at all of their feedback and say, all right, well, high level, here's what I'm seeing based on your inline feedback for this student, right? And it saves them. It might save them 5-10 minutes of reflection per paper to write a summary paragraph for the student, which is a key part of giving good, writing feedback. So essentially, what we've done is we've moved the teacher directly to, hey, what you really want to do, what the student really needs from you is that reflection, is the activation of your mental model. What can we do to get you there as quickly as possible, right? And it's not so much about saying we have a model that is able to displace the teacher's intuition. I think what we want to do is really augment and accelerate all of that so that the teacher can get to that critical moment as quickly as possible. There's still going to be work. It's still going to be complicated, and teaching is complicated and messy. But if we can take away some of that low-level work, I think we free up more time to do that high-level thinking. And that's going to make these previously unscalable assignment types that we know are really powerful much more scalable.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, I mean, a tool like that, I mean, I'm just thinking about, I mean, all the professors and so on who are completely crushed in terms of the amount of time that they have, especially like with grading and everything else, and anything that will save them time is sort of amazing. I think, I mean, the potential for there is huge. Like you said, I mean, obviously, you're at the part in the process where you're trying to scale it up. But I can see at scale how this could really free up a lot of educator time, since they're already kind of hard pressed between everything. I imagine that that's sort of like, I mean, if you think of like the best case scenario for the future of AI in education, it would probably look like something like that, right? Where teachers are assisted by AI, where AI is integrated in a responsible way into classrooms, right? I mean, is that's sort of like the end state, you would think, in terms of AI use in classrooms?
I don't know if I'd use the word end state. There's so much change happening. What I can tell you is I would love to get to that next stair step where educators feel like they have room to teach and to assess in these much more powerful, open-ended, rich ways, and where students feel a great sense of trust and openness, where the idea of I'm using AI, everyone can see how the AI is used, and instead of I might be punished for incorrectly using AI, it's the idea of I'm learning to use this tool. I'm learning to use AI in a safe environment. This is a skill that I'm practicing rather than some sort of gray area cloak and dagger game where I'm not being judged as far as like, am I doing a good or bad thing by using this technology? And instead, I'm learning to use it as a really valuable skill. And that's really what underlies everything that we're building.
Cool. Great. Yeah, no, that was the extent of the talking points that I had. This is really fascinating. Like I said, I come from a family of educators. I'm friends with tons of professors and teachers. So, I mean, delving into this was really fascinating for me. And thank you for giving me kind of the really nuanced dive down into kind of the thinking behind it, because I think it's just really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, educators are, I think educators are some of the most important people um, in society, in my opinion. I think if I look at what makes what's important for society, maybe this gets a little philosophical, but time goes one way, and all of us as we progress through our lives, I think one of the most important things we can do is to pass on that knowledge, right? That shared sense of communal human knowledge, so that somewhat the next generation can carry it forward and build on what we've built before. And when you look at it through that lens, really there is nothing more important than unlocking that potential in students and helping them realize that they have enormous and great potential, and then having ways of where they can show that potential to the world in very transparent and high trust ways. And I don't, I think that's been the holy grail of education for a long time. I think we're closer to it now than we have before. And I think the world is more complicated now than it has been before. So the more clarity that we can bring, the more transparency that we can bring to the world, I think the better shot we have of really helping that next generation, get the knowledge that they need and having them take society forward.
Well, that was interesting. Even if you're not involved in academia, I think that this discussion provided some interesting takeaways for anyone who's curious about how to best integrate AI into their learning and workflows. Here are some quick takeaways. First, embrace AI as a tool and understand its nuances. As a tech professional, recognize that AI is a powerful and transformative tool, not an inherent threat. Understand its capabilities and limitations, particularly the distinction between AI's human-like abilities and uniquely human traits like creativity and genuine connection. Focus on how AI can augment your work and learning, but also identify areas where human ingenuity and critical thinking remain paramount. Be prepared to navigate the evolving landscape of AI integration in your field and advocate for its ethical and productive use. Second, acknowledge and address user anxiety around AI. Be aware that the adoption of AI can generate significant anxiety, even among those who stand to benefit. This is particularly true for individuals earlier in their careers or those facing substantial shifts in established workflows. As a tech professional, you have a role in fostering understanding and trust around AI. This involves clear communication about its purpose and limitations, establishing guidelines for ethical use, and supporting those who may feel uncertain about its impact on their roles and their future prospects. Third, cultivate human-centric skills in an AI-driven world. Recognize that the increasing capabilities of AI in handling routine and even complex tasks will elevate the importance of uniquely human skills. Focus on developing your creative intuition, problem-solving abilities, and capacity for collaboration and communication. The future of tech will likely favor those who can define problems, envision innovative solutions, and lead teams, which might include AI agents, effectively. Prioritize continuous learning in areas that complement AI's strengths. Fourth, contribute to the development of responsible AI integration. As a tech professional, your expertise is crucial in shaping the responsible integration of AI. This includes building tools that promote transparency and understanding of AI's role in various processes, such as learning and assessment. Consider how AI can be used to augment human capabilities, automate tedious tasks, and provide valuable insights without replacing human judgment entirely. Advocate for and contribute to the development of frameworks and best practices that ensure AI is used, again, ethically, been using that word a lot, effectively, also using that word a lot, and in a way that fosters trust and positive outcomes across industries. There was a lot more in that discussion, of course, so give it another listen if you feel so inclined. Thank you for joining us, and remember, DICE is your best resource to find the tech talent you need to fill your open roles, and for tech pros, the best place to grow your tech career.